Prof. Dr. Hassan to present his topic today about today's topic is what postgraduate student and supervisor should know from the examiner's perspective. Okay, pass to you, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much to Dr. Suzaimah, the chairperson for the program today. And also thank you very much to Printis for organizing and inviting me to share my experience on this topic, examiner's perspective, what postgraduate students and supervisors should know. I am currently, as mentioned by Dr. Suzaimah, I am a young professor at University Technology Malaysia. I retired on the 12th of June this year from the School of Chemical and Energy Engineering at the Faculty of Engineering. Okay. Before I start, let me introduce a little bit about myself. Okay, the first picture is me with my students back in 2010. I have students from many countries, from Nigeria, from Pakistan, from Iran, from Iraq, and of course from Malaysia. And all of them now has graduated, and two of them in the picture now are professors in University of Basra, and one is a professor in University of Nigeria. The next picture is me with my family. Sitting beside me is my wife, Dr. Zainuha Zakaria, also retired from UTM. She was from chemistry department at the Faculty of Science. And with my 3 children and three sons and 3 daughters-in-law. And altogether now I have 10 grandchildren. And then the picture with Raja Nazrin, Sultan Nazrin, getting the award of Top Scientist Malaysia in 2016. And recently I was elected as the Fellow of Academy Science of Malaysia, 3 of us from UTM in the year of 2020. And this is my latest Google Scholar profile. My highest cited paper is a paper from Materials and Design, which has been cited 492 times, and it was being published in 2013. And this paper was awarded as the top cited paper in UTM, I think 2 years ago. 2 years ago, this paper was being awarded as the most cited papers in UTM. And this is my publication and publication record. Currently, my H index in Scopus is 41, and my Google Scholar H index is 48. And I have supervised postgraduate students, mainly PhD, around 80 students. And I have examined PhD students and master students for 108 candidates. So this will be the presentation outline of my talk. I would divide my talk into 6 sections: introduction, general perspective of examiners, thesis, examination process, achievements that influence examiners, examples of examiners' comments, and lastly, I would end my talk with concluding remarks. Okay. In the introduction, I will have 4 slides. The first one, I will touch on why it's important to understand the perspective of an examiner, meaning that why this topic is important to know, especially to the students. And secondly, I will be talking about role of examiners. Thirdly, what is the possible outcome that a candidate will get? And fourthly, what are the criteria when the university select or nominate the examiners? Okay, firstly, before we discuss further, we should understand why is it important to understand the perspective of an examiner. For the students and the supervisors, it is important to understand, because to ensure the students can successfully graduate. If we do not understand the perspective of examiner, we will end up the students did not achieve what the students aim to, that is to successfully graduate with a PhD or master's. And the examiners are also important to understand this topic, to ensure that the examiners can perform their role as examiners. Okay, so we see the both perspective, but more importantly is for the students to understand what are the perspective of an examiner. There is a book being published, a very popular book, which I have get to know just before I started my PhD in 1992. The book entitled "How to Get a PhD," a handbook for students and their supervisors. So if you read this book, in chapter 4, there is chapter 4, the title is "How Not to Get a PhD." It is interesting. The title of the book is "How to Get a PhD," but the title of the chapter is "How Not to Get a PhD." So in this chapter, the authors have discussed, there are, I think, around 9 reasons how not to get a PhD. But the most interesting to me is the reason number 2 and number 3. That is not understanding the nature of PhD by overestimating what is required. That means the student overestimate what is the requirement of PhD, and the other one is not understanding the nature of a PhD by underestimating what is required. Underestimating what is required. And the next one is related to the supervisor. There is not having a supervisor who knows what a PhD requires. So these are the 3 important factors that can end up the student not getting their PhD. Now, I would like to discuss about the role of examiners. So it will start with examine a thesis. The examiner will receive the thesis and will be given. Some universities, they give 1 month, and the maximum, I think, is 2 months. And then the examiner has to write a pre-viva report. Pre-viva report. And this is an independent report. Independent report, meaning that the examiner should not discuss with anybody in writing the pre-viva report. And then the examiner will have to participate in the viva. Normally it was face-to-face, but due to the our situation of COVID-19, most of the viva now are conducted online. And then after that, we will have a meeting, a short meeting between all the panel members of the panel members of the examiner to come out with the post-viva report. So as you all know that we will have the internal and external examiner and also a chairman for during the viva. Normally, when I was in UK, there was no chairman. The internal examiner will play the role as the chairman. And in certain universities in Malaysia, they need 2 external examiners. And in certain university also in Malaysia, they have 2 internal examiners for PhD. 2 internal examiners for PhD. And if the student is a staff of that particular university, for example, in UTM, we will also have 2 internal examiners. 2 internal examiners. If the PhD is the industrial PhD, then we will have 2 external, 1 from the university and 1 from the industry. So there will be 3 examiners for industrial PhD. Right. And it is important that each examiner produce an independent report before the viva. So these are the outcome. These are the outcome from the viva. It can be a pass, which is very rare. In UTM, I think we will have 1 or 2 per year that a student pass and be awarded PhD without any correction. And then majority of students will get 2 and 3. There is pass with minor corrections and pass with major corrections. The difference between pass with minor correction and major correction will be the duration given to improve the thesis, and also importantly, who will check the correction. If it is a minor correction, it must be approved by the supervisor first, and then the internal examiner most likely will endorse it. Okay. However, if the external examiner wants to check the thesis, then it also be given, but it is very rare. The external examiner wants to check the thesis which has passed with minor correction. If it is major correction, then they will have a longer time given. I think in UTM it is 9 months, 9 months or 12 months. For the PhD with minor correction, it is 6 months. Before it was 3 months. And then for major correction, it is must be approved also by the supervisor and the internal examiner for endorsement. But sometimes external examiner may also be required to verify the revision. And the next one will be a resubmission. Normally, a resubmission will be followed by revival, or the student needs to do more experiments. And the last one, it is fail, where the student is withdrawn from the program. What are the criteria used by the universities in nominating examiners? One is they will check the CV. So the supervisors will have to submit the CV of the proposed examiner to the committee, and they will check. So among other things that they will check will be experience in examining, whether that particular lecturer has examined any PhD thesis, experience in supervising, experience in reviewing journal papers, because the experience in reviewing journal papers are also important when we want to examine the thesis. And then expertise, whether the area is similar to the nominated examiner. The reputation is reputation, whether that person has very good reputation, or is there any experience in which the examiner has a negative reputation. And of course, the very important thing is the record of the publication. Record of a publication will show the reputation and the expertise of the examiner. Okay. Secondly, now I am going to the next topic on the general perspective of examiners. Okay, number one, the examiners tend to see themselves as gatekeepers. That means the examiners see them as very important in upholding the standards for a doctorate. So the examiners have the responsibility, and they feel that it is their responsibility to ensure that the PhD that will be awarded is of the required standard, not only recognized in Malaysia, but it is a PhD that will be recognized anywhere in the world. So when we are appointed as examiner, then we will uphold this trust, and we will carefully assess whether the study has fulfilled what it has intended to achieve. So we will see what is the objective of the study, and we will check whether the objective has been met. And then the examiners mostly were eager to offer constructive feedback. So when I attend the Viva, I not only would like to check the quality of the thesis, but most, including me, we are very eager to offer constructive feedback to improve the thesis, rather than to condemn. We want to improve because we would like to see that when the thesis is being put in the library or being read by other students, then they will see that the thesis is of the required standard, and they will not repeat any mistake that have been done by the previous students. So they will see a good thesis in the shelf of the library, and when they refer to the thesis, there are so many things that that student will learn from the thesis. So we the examiners feel that we have the responsibility to ensure that the thesis is up to the required standard. slide is not moving. All right. Secondly, examiners decide early about the quality of thesis. Okay. So normally when we receive the thesis, we can have certain idea about the quality of thesis early in the process. That's why first impression counts. So you must give a very good first impression to the examiner. Not many spelling and grammatical errors in the title, especially. Even in the title, some students may have some mistake. I have an example of this. Abstract, table of content, and conclusion. Okay. If I may give my experience, when I received a thesis recently, I saw in the table of content pages, it was been written error on the content of pages. So I'm not sure what does it means. So when I check the pages in the table of content is not consistent with the real pages. So it is giving not a very good first impression to me. Not a very good first impression to me. Also, there was a mistake in the title. Okay. So the examiners make judgment about the quality of the thesis when they just reading the abstract and the chapter 1. Chapter 1. Normally, through my experience, if I receive the thesis, I will check whether are there anything peculiar about the thesis. For example, there is no objective. There is no objective. I have received one thesis, which in chapter 1 there is no objective. So it is very rare. And I will, if I see the thesis is not normal, then I will go into more detail to see what other things that is not normal about this thesis. Okay. Number 3, examiners expect a reader-friendly thesis. Okay. As human beings, we like to read the thesis which are enjoyable and also exciting. So when we read, we want to read more to know the story about this achievement from this particular candidate. So you must write in a way that it should be enjoyable and exciting. That will meet the examiner's academic and also normal reader expectation. And it must have good flow. Good flow from chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. That is the examiner's favor of a coherent thesis that will have good flow and logical structure. Logical structure means that each chapter will not contradict each other. What you have mentioned in chapter 1 is consistent in result and discussion. Okay, and it integrates and connects parts of the thesis. And a good friendly thesis will have signposts telling what is coming, what has been done. Signposts, for example, let's say you are writing chapter 3 on methodology. You will have a short introduction telling what is coming in chapter 3, how you divide chapter 3, what are the subsections. Also, when you write your literature review, it is good that you have short introduction telling what are coming so that the reader would be prepared and would be excited to read. Okay. And also what has been done. For example, if you have chosen certain formulation for your future experiment, then probably you need to explain that you have chosen that particular formulation. So you need to tell what has been done so that the examiner will not be lost. They can understand and follow the thesis. Examiners expect professional presentation. Okay. So examiners will be annoyed by presentation errors, as I have already mentioned just now. Formatting errors, whereby one example of formatting errors is you do not pay particular attention to your reference. Each reference will have different style of reference. Unclear writing, incorrect or inconsistent citation. The way you cite, probably you mix up different style. Abbreviation not explained. You use certain abbreviation, but it was not being explained. So the examiner will be annoyed. Or you can also repeat the explanation of abbreviation every time. So what you need to do is you need to only explain your abbreviation the first time. Okay, the first time. But the abstract is a standalone part. So if you have explained the abstract, you need to explain again in chapter 1. But you don't need to explain every time when you meet the word. For example, PLA, polylactic acid. So every time a PLA, then you put polylactic acid. You need only to put once. References that are omitted or misreported. References that are omitted and misreported, especially if the reference are the examiner knows very well and they can check that you have misreported. Sometimes some names you can cite wrongly cite because we are not sure which one is the surname. Sometimes we are not sure which one is the surname. Then we misreport their names in the text. Incorrect publication dates or misspelled names. Content pages errors, as I have mentioned just now. Repeated explanation of abbreviation and wrong use of small and capital letter. Small. For example, simple thing like if you say as shown in figure 6, then the figure, the F should be a capital letter, not a small letter. Examiners expect a thesis to pass. Okay. We know that before a student or candidate are allowed to submit the thesis, the supervisor must have checked the thesis. And the student has spent a lot of time and effort, and it was being judged worthy by the supervisors. So the examiners are actually very reluctant to fail a thesis unless it is proven to have significant errors that will threaten the credibility of the research or the university. Okay. So according to a study, less than 1% of examiners recommend a failure. Okay. As I have mentioned, I have examined more than 100 theses at postgraduate level, and I have failed one student as an external examiner. The student failed in the first viva, and then the student have to attend the second viva, and then the examiners decide that the student failed. One of the reasons that it was quite difficult for me to pass that particular student because the ruling of particular university is that for the second viva, there is no more correction. It is either pass or fail. So I have no choice to make the verdict. So although I feel very, very sad of my decision. Examiners, number 6, examiners tend to be broadly consistent. So a study has been done and paper has been published that despite differences in the countries from where we come, our discipline and level of experience of examiners, normally we will look for the same core qualities. Okay, we will discuss okay, what are the core qualities, but there is no much difference between all the examiners because we have ourselves undergone the training in our PhD. And examiners generally agree on whether a thesis pass or fail, okay, but may disagree on the specifics, whether to give minor correction and major correction. I have seen the data from my own university, which was being discussed at, I think, at Senate level. Most of the results generally shows the agreement between the examiners that if the first examiner give a minor correction, the second examiner would probably, high likely, would also give minor correction or major correction. Okay. There is very, very rare, but it happens where examiners give a minor correction and the other examiner give a resubmission. But it is not the norm, but it can happen. And it is quite interesting if we can make a study why the examiner differs with one giving a minor correction.
Something to explain, you need to have a theory to explain something, but to show the truth, you need to have a data. So the way you collect data is empirical.
Can you please mute, Mr. Saad?
Is
can the urustia
something that
mute everybody? Okay. Okay. However, the examiners may have different style of examining. Although we may agree with our decision, but the style of examining may differ. Okay, now we go to the third part, the thesis examination process. How does an examiner examine a thesis? There is no one correct way, but most examiners will begin by reading abstract to have the whole picture, and we will read the introduction, which has the background, and check the problem statement, objective, and refer to the conclusion, whether there is any consistency between the conclusion and the chapter 1. Okay. And then many examiners also will look at the references to see the sources which have been used, because the references will show the quality of the thesis, what the candidate have read and what they have referred. Okay. And finally, most examiners will read from cover to cover, taking detailed notes. Finally, go back over the thesis to check whether their questions have been answered or whether the criticisms that they have written are really justified or not. So we will read at least twice or more to really understand the thesis, and so that we will be fair to the students. And the student must check the regulation of the university to ensure that they satisfy the university's regulation. So normally the thesis will have this section, the preliminaries. We have the text, okay, introduction, literature review, methodology, results and discussion. Normally, many students now, they would like to divide the results and discussion into more chapters, maybe 2 or 3. Okay. But you must have good reason why the results and discussion are divided in such manner. In such manner, you need to justify to the examiner why it is being divided in such a way, and then you will have a conclusion, and then you have reference material, your own references, appendices, any equation that you want to derive, and the list of publication. So in the list of publication, you can include your papers. Either it is accepted or published, but do not include papers which you have submitted only. It must be either accepted or published. And also the conferences that you have participated with your name as the authors. And also if you have any patent, or you can also list if you have maybe won any medals in the exhibition, or you have won any competition, for example, the 3 minutes thesis competition, to show the strength of your work. Okay. The title should be effective, convey the main topics of the study, highlight the importance of the research, be concise, accurate, and meaningful and interesting. You should make the title to be interesting, besides it is meaningful, and it will be set the boundary to where the research concentrate. So by reading the title, then the reader would know what are the focus of this particular research. These are examples of good titles, I think. Number 1, corrosion barrier and flame retardancy properties of epoxy coating modified with nanofillers. This is one of title of my PhD student. Previously, we have the word enhancement of corrosion properties, but the external examiner advised that since the improvement in the properties is not that significant, because the epoxy has already good corrosion properties, so the nanofillers which we incorporate do not improve that significant. So it will be more appropriate just to use corrosion barrier and flame retardancy properties. Okay. And we will use the word nanofillers because the student use 3 types of nanofillers. So if the student has used only one type, only graphene, then we have to specify that the nanofillers is graphene. But if we have used various nanofillers, then it is better that we use the word nanofillers. Okay, so these are some of the example. Method for integration of lattice structures in design for additive manufacturing. So it is clear what is the purpose of this design. That is for additive manufacturing. Examples of less effective title. A comprehensive experimental study using DOE approach on surface integrity of titanium particles. So the comment is that the title have some unnecessary words, and also the student or the candidate has used lesser known abbreviation. Okay. In UTM, if we want to use abbreviation in the title, we have to really justify that the abbreviation is widely known. Okay. Properties of hybrid natural fiber composites. Okay. The title is too short and use words which are too broad, and it is not clear to the reader what is actually being studied. Okay, these are some examples of title. The first one is the title is too long and there are many redundancies. And the second one, it is too short. Too short, and it's not clear what the study is all about. The third one is actually it is acceptable, but the revised title is more attractive and interesting. So these are some of the titles. Okay. The next one is the abstract. The abstract is very important when we write the thesis and also when we write the journal papers. And it should consist of the problem statement, objective, methodology, main findings, and then the implication. So all these things must be part of the abstract. And the chapter 1 is the introduction. And the introduction generally is divided into research background, problem statement, research objective, scope of study, and significance of study. In chapter 1, the first three is very important. The research background, problem statement, and research objective is compulsory. In University Technology Malaysia, normally the student will have scope of study. But if I can remember correctly, when I was doing in England, in Loughborough, we do not have this section on scope of study and significance of study. But it is good to have these 5 subsections and highlighting very important and relevant issues, but not in detail. Make it between 5 to 8 pages. Okay. In the background, what normally I advise the student is to use the background to elaborate the keywords in the title and to create the interest of the readers by setting up the scenarios, getting information from various sources, the data. You get the facts and figures, either locally or globally, to show and to create the interest of readers. And flow of thought leading to the problem statement and objective. And also in the background of research, you should try to minimize overlapping with problem statement and objective. Since we have the section on problem statement and objective, so do not touch the problem to a great extent in the background of research. So the overlapping between the problem statement section and the background of research should be minimized. Okay. And then you have a problem statement. Problem statement is a description of a difficulty or lack that needs to be solved, or at least research to see whether a solution can be found. So problem statement is obtained when you have done a thorough literature review. It is a gap between the real and the desired, or the contradiction between principle and what is being practiced. And a good problem statement will include statement of hypothesis. A hypothesis is a supposition or a proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. So hypothesis can also be defined as an intelligent guess. You expect what would happen if you change certain parameters or you did something to the problem. So in order to get a good problem statement, you need to do a thorough literature review so that you will extend the boundary of knowledge. And you must know whether that new knowledge is significant or not. Okay. Now, if you look at the figure, the picture there, you have from the current knowledge point, the target will be target knowledge point. So you have that knowledge gap. Okay, that knowledge gap is what is the problem statement. Okay. However, not all knowledge gap is considered to be a good problem statement. Okay, I will discuss about that. Okay, this is a circle of PhD circle. I like to show this to my research methodology student. From when we are small, we have no knowledge, then our knowledge increased gradually when we went to school. And before we do our PhD, we will be here. We'll be here. And then when we started to do the literature review, we will reach, our knowledge will reach where at the boundary of the circle. So now, after reading all the literatures, gathering all the literatures, and before we do the experiment, our knowledge should be at this stage, at the boundary of the circle. And then we start doing, we know the objective of our research, and we started doing the experiment and gathering the data, and then we will work in the lab to push this boundary until we increase the size of the circle and we make a dance. And that dance is our PhD. So that is our PhD. So actually our contribution is not big compared to the whole circle, but it should be important and it should be significant enough for us to get PhD. Okay. So this is, we have made the circle bigger now due to the work that we have done, and that then is our PhD. However, looking at the whole circle, that then is not that big. But it is our contribution that we are proud of, that we want to share with the rest of the world. So when we write the introduction, we must show that there is some gap of knowledge. There are certain words that you can get from the journal. So this is one example. To the best of our knowledge, limited studies have been conducted on the use of MMT CNW hybrid fillers in PLA polymer. So this is the sort of sentences that shows the gap of knowledge and limited studies have been done. So normally when you write limited studies, you should prove that what are the limited. So this paper is very similar to our research, but there is one difference. So you need to highlight what are the difference between your current study and the previous study. And the last is something about what is your expected changes when you do the experiment. It is the hypothesis of your research. Okay. When is the gap of knowledge is not a good problem statement? I have listened to one YouTube where they discuss about not all the gap of knowledge can be considered to be a good problem statement. Example is that, okay, let's say in my field, I use the knaf fiber to modify the properties of polymer. Okay, if most of the knaf that is being done is obtained from Southeast Asia countries. Yeah. So there is somebody who wants to do PhD using knaf which is obtained from Nigeria, for example. So there is a gap of knowledge because no study has been done on the knaf fibers which is being planted in Nigeria. However, in order for it to be a good problem statement, you need to justify why the data from the knaf fiber from Malaysia or Indonesia cannot be used for that particular polymer composites. So you need to justify why the difference between the knaf fiber from Nigeria, probably the chemical content is different, the amount of lignin, the amount of cellulose is different, that and maybe the fiber, the length of the quality of the fiber is different. So if you can justify that there are differences, then that gap of knowledge will be a good problem statement. If not, it is not a good problem statement. For example, you study about the drug addiction in Selangor, and then you want to study in Johor. So you need to justify why that gap of knowledge is important to know. What is the significant? Then it will be a good problem statement. Probably we can discuss after this. You can write whether you agree or disagree with me in the chat. Objective. So objective is the very specific statement giving the purpose of the study, and normally you need to have certain verb that indicate clearly the variable of study: to determine, to investigate, to study, to relate. Okay, and certain, through my experience, certain examiners, they are very they do not like certain keywords to be used. For example, to study, because it is too general. So you need to use the word like to correlate, or maybe to evaluate is better. Then, are the objective significant addition to the existing knowledge? Or are the objective related to the problem statement? This is one of my popular questions. When I examine a student during the thesis, I would like the student to explain that how for example, the three objectives related to the problem statement. Normally, for a PhD, you need to have at least 3 objectives, 3 to 4 objectives, and masters is either 2 or 3 objectives. So you need to relate the problem statement and the objective. You need to tell that the objective that you are going to study is being discussed in the problem statement section, and there is a gap of knowledge there. Literature review in chapter 2. So the literature review should be relevant, comprehensive, and up to date. And a good literature review should end with a short summary at the chapter telling what are the gaps in knowledge which have been identified. So you probably elaborate more what has been discussed in chapter 1, and you need to be very selective. You need to know the reasons for your why you select certain papers or publication. And you need to include key references and key researchers in the area. Okay. So if you are studying on the graphene nanocomposites. So there are certain key researchers in the world that have worked on this. So it is better that you cite their papers. So you need to know the key researchers and the key references. Some of the review papers, that have been written. For example, I like to quote in my field, if somebody is doing work on Knauf composite, there is one review paper written by a professor in USM, which is being highly cited, Professor Hazizan. Normally, students will cite that paper. It is a famous review paper published in Materials and Design. Textbook material versus journal papers. You should know how much of the material in the literature review are the textbook material, which is already known and written in textbook, and how much would be from the journal papers. So for a PhD thesis, you should have more from the journal papers, but some of the basic things you can cite. It is better, in fact, to cite a good textbook or review papers. Okay, and you use the papers that you cite in literature review to explain the results in chapter 4. How long should literature review be in comparison with results and discussion? Okay, if you have, for me, the literature review section should not be longer than the result and discussion, because the result and discussion is the most important part of your thesis, and you cannot have 80 pages of literature review and only 20 pages of result and discussion. The result and discussion should be more. Okay. Chapter 3 will be the methodology. I would prefer the chapter 3 to be methodology rather than research methodology, because research methodology means the whole concept of doing the research, but this chapter is methodology. And this chapter will be thoroughly analyzed by the experts. If the examiner is an expert in this field, so they will analyze thoroughly that your method is correct. The material and method should be detailed enough to ensure that the work is reproducible. And the experimental design, you should have the flow chart to clearly express that your experimental design answer the research objective, and the data properly collected and analyzed with sufficient sample size. For example, in my field, if the student do impact testing, then the number of samples should be at least 5. And you should understand all the principles of the equipment that you use. Even if you have sent that particular experiment to a research officer, for example, you send the samples of the TEM, transmission electron microscopy, to the research officer to do, but you need to understand properly the principle. It can be asked by the examiner, and you should understand why you do certain experiment and what are the range temperature that you use and so on. You should know that thoroughly because it can be asked by the examiner. And results and discussion, which is the most important part of your thesis. Firstly, there must be a statement that locates where the figure and tables can be found. And the results obtained should answer the research objective. Okay. And results, are the results meaningful and significant? So you should explain the trend, whether the increase is significant enough or not. And the results must be presented clearly with proper labeling and also good title of the figures and tables. The discussion must be accurate and appropriate to the results. So the examiner will check whether what you describe in the table and what you have discussed in the text are similar. And you should provide reasons for the trend. Compare the values that you obtain with the published data. Sometimes when you do some experiment, for example, you do the tensile testing of polyethylene terephthalate, you get values of 5 megapascal. You should compare the values obtained from the company data sheet or from previous published data, because the real data you should get around 60. Now you are getting only 5. So there must be something wrong with how you do the experiment, or there's something wrong with the machine. So it is very important that you compare the values that you obtain with the literature. Discuss your result first, then use references of other people's work to compare with your results. There are many students who, when they discuss their results, they tell other people's results first. After many paragraphs, then they will start talking about their own results. That should not be the way. You should start with your own results, and then you compare with the results of other people. And if there are similar explanations given, you should combine the explanation, because many students, when they read from many various papers, they will take all the explanation given. But actually, although the wordings are different, but the meaning is quite similar. So you should combine the similar explanation and make it as one sentence, or you make it concise. Conclusion and recommendation. Normally, we will have 2 sections in the chapter 6, conclusions and recommendations for future work. And you will start with some brief introduction, telling what this is what I call a signpost, so that when the reader reads, they would know what is coming in this chapter. The conclusions must refer to only work done in the present study. You should not use other data to make conclusion. It should only refer to the work done in the present study. And it should follow logically from the body of the thesis and address all the objectives. So all the objectives must be addressed in the conclusion. And it must be not too long, clearly expressed, and comprehensive. And some examiners, they would like to include quantitative results, some numbers, not only show an increase, but how much increase. And you describe how the study advances research in this area, some practical implication, and what are the potential application. Should synthesize all the findings into a story with an impact. And by this at this stage, the examiner should be able to see clearly what are the unique contribution of this study, of this thesis. And the references should be up to date and comprehensive. It should include all the important papers in this area, up to date. Some students the references are not up to date because, for example, in their chapter 2, they have done in their proposal 2 years or 3 years ago. So when they want to submit the final thesis, they have not improved the literature review. So there are no papers in the last 2 years or 3 years. Okay, so you need to update your references since you wrote, the last time you wrote the proposal. And you must follow the university's format. So it is important for you to download the university's regulation and thesis guideline. And the reference must really follow the format. Even though the examiner himself do not know the university's format in writing reference, but when they read the reference, they know that you have not followed actually the university format. How do they know? They know because the reference style keep changing from one to the other. Okay, so one of them must be wrong. So each must be consistent. And many students they wrongly use when they cite books or book chapters. And it is also important for you to understand the context of the reference paper, meaning that you should read all the papers that you have cited. You should know, you should understand and should know the context of the paper, because the examiner has the right to ask. If some of the papers that the examiners are very familiar, so they can check whether you really read the papers or not, or only you cite the papers from other papers without actually reading the papers. Recommendations for future work. Okay, you can write in point form. I would advise it should be in point form, between 2 to 4 recommendations, and it should be related to the present work, and it should reflect your understanding that you have the knowledge of a bigger picture. Okay. Achievements that influence examiners. So what you should do in order for the examiner, when they read your thesis, when they see your thesis, that they have good impression of your work. Okay, I have written here 5 things. You should try to publish papers in a good journal. Conference presentation, you should participate in the 3 minutes thesis competition. Participate in exhibition like the ITEX or the various exhibition for research, and try to have a patent or copyright or other intellectual properties. When this is my advice, when you attend the conferences, you should take the opportunity, besides to gain knowledge from the technical talks, you should take advantage to do networking. Try to take advantage of the coffee breaks to talk to other people, to other professors, to other lecturers, to other students. Let me check the time. And get contact information from other people you want to stay, because the people you meet during the coffee break or during lunch can be your external examiner. I have an experience when I became keynote speaker in one of the conference organized by USM. So one of the participants met me during the coffee break, and we discussed, and then he mentioned that he might propose me to be his external examiner to his supervisor. Okay, so then I actually became his external examiner. After that, we became good friends. We wrote, he worked with me. Now he has moved to other universities, and we have published many papers together. Other papers not related to his PhD, but other papers together. So attending conference can be a turning point. You can meet very interesting people who will hire you maybe in future, can review your papers and become your future collaborators. So take this opportunity. But now we don't have too many conferences with face-to-face. So probably in future you can attend conference and be more exposed to other researchers. Publish in papers. Okay, it may be harder than you think, and good results may not be published due to sloppy writing. So as much as possible, try to publish in good journals. Now for the research universities audit, they stress on publication in Q1 and Q2 journals. Discuss with your supervisor, make a plan, write a clear abstract introduction. But this topic on publication is a lecture on its own, so I will not go into detail. So make sure you get confirmation from supervisor before submitting, and read your final paper carefully before submitting, and try to publish in good journals. Okay. Because if you, nowadays in most universities, it is a requirement to publish at least in Scopus journal. But you must go to the extra mile to publish in better journals, because if you publish just in Scopus Index journal, then the examiner will have the impression that your work is not up to standards to be published in better journals. So we should try to give a good impression to the examiners by publishing in better journals. Okay. Now I would like to go to some examples of examiners' comment, which I would like to share. This is some of the comments. The title does not convey the major topic discussed in the thesis. Okay. Number two, I think it is related to the literature review. Some students, they write the literature review only discussing on general issues. And the problem is only a general problem, but they have not gone specific to the experiment that they have discussed. They have not shown how the objective is answering the gap of knowledge. Okay. The objectives are not related to the experiment and to the discussion. There is a clear focus is lacking. Many topics and writings are reviewed in the literature review chapter, but it is not connected. It's not connected and confusing. So when you plan writing your literature review, you should know what should be the main topic, how the topic is divided, what is subsection, and so on. So you need to plan your literature review together, your literature review better. Yeah. Okay, chapter should be broken up. The literature review should be broken up with better subheadings. It is now very confusing. Okay, literature review is very disjointed. For the literature review, you should be very selective and know the reasons why you select certain papers. This literature review chapter has little focus, and particularly not on the subject of the thesis. Throughout the chapter, there seems to be unexpected mixing of metric and imperial measures. Okay? You should be consistent whether you want to use metric. So now we should use the metric, and also even the language, whether you want to use British English, American language, or Australian language, or Malaysian language, Malaysian English. So there should be a consistency. This is another thing which I normally see in students' thesis. The results and discussion section was written like a literature review. Okay. Actually, in the result and discussion, when you cite the paper, it should be in comparison with your results, not independently. So what you write in literature review should be of different style when compared to what you write in the results and discussion. There is no comparison with the trend from previous studies in the discussion. There is no reasons given for the increase in tensile strength, for example. So you need to give some reason. And also I found that the reason given by the students seems to contradict with one another. For example, if the experiment shows an increase in tensile strength, but decrease in tensile modulus, the student will say that when the increase in tensile strength, there is good adhesion between the fibers and the polymers. But when the decrease in tensile modulus, the students say that it is a poor adhesion for the same material. So you can see there is this contradiction in the thesis. Lacking of recent reference. Many references quoted in the text are missing from reference section. The objectives are inconsistent with the problem statement. This is what I have mentioned. Conclusion and abstract should be more quantitative. Language problem. Abbreviation use are not explained. Use of capital letter. Okay. Choice of words or connecting words are not appropriate. I found this quite rampant in the sense that the students, they do not use the connecting words properly. However, it's not used, for example, connecting words. However, it's not used at the right place. And this is quite serious. Data may not be sufficient for PhD level. If the data collected is not sufficient, then they may need for more experiment. So the supervisors must make sure before the students submit, the things that is very much needed is that the data collected must be sufficient for PhD. Okay, there is only one reference throughout section 2.3. Okay, maybe the number of reference at the back is sufficient. For example, they have used 200 reference, but there is no reference in certain part. For example, in chapter 1, there is very few reference, or in chapter result in discussion, there are only few reference. So you must use the reference appropriately. Some figures are missing from the thesis. No discussion on certain figures that you put in the literature review. You put certain figure, but there is no, it looks interesting, but you do not discuss anything. And the figures must appear before the text. It is a rule, okay? The figure, and the figure must not, even if it appear after the text, but it must not be very far from the figure itself. The text must not be very far after the figure. Okay. I like just to share with the junior lecturers, if they are present today, what are the benefits of being an examiner. So it is good, when asked to be an examiner, you should try to accept. You should try to accept. Because it is indication of peers in your field recognizing you as an expert. It will help you to enhance the supervisory skills, give insight into the doctoral process and expected standards in the thesis. Compare reports and enhances our experience as supervisors. One of the things which I like being an examiner is to learn from other examiners. So I like, if I am the external examiner, I would like the internal examiner to be a very good one, that I can learn. So I will jot down what are the sort of question that the other examiner will ask, and also I will try to learn new knowledge, new technical knowledge from the other examiner. So it is a very good experience being an examiner. Also, if you are being invited to review a journal paper, I think you should also try to accept, because it will sharpen your skill when you write the paper. So this experience being examiner and reviewer will make you a better researcher and a better academician. So in the Viva process, okay, why PhD candidates have to attend a Viva? Okay, the most important thing is that they want to assess whether this work, which is written in the thesis, is your own work, and to see whether the candidate understands what has been written, and to clearly confirm what is the contribution to knowledge, and to see the candidate's command of that subject area. If I can share my experience becoming an examiner to Pretoria University in South Africa, it was, I think, 4 years ago. It was being done online. So after the Viva session, the chairman asked me whether I can confirm that the thesis is that candidate's work. So it is very important. This Viva is to ensure that you can prove the thesis is your work. Okay? You understand the methodology, you understand the result and discussion, and the examiner has the right to ask any parts of your thesis. So you must able to understand, to explain not only your research part, but also your literature review. So you need to understand the literature review very well and thoroughly. Okay, now we come to the end of the talk. The concluding remarks, the take-home message. Okay, the most important thing is that your PhD thesis must clearly show the significant contribution to knowledge. The significant contribution to knowledge, and you must not leave the examiners guessing. So it must be very clear the significant contribution of knowledge from your thesis. And the examiners, as I have said, sees this as a very important aspect, that they are upholding the standards for a doctorate. With that, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Prof, for an informative and interesting talk. From the chat here, we have a few questions for you. Okay, first from Rauda Waba from UKM. Salam all. First of all, thanks to you much. Thank you so much, Prof, for an interesting and informative session today. I want to ask, which one come first, objective or research question? And the second question, how many pages for literature review? In my case, in literature review, I have written around 70 pages because I have referred to the fundamental to my work as well as the previous studies for my problem statement. I have seen the topics are connected to each other, but I worried if the examiner think I have written so much thing in this part. Which is your advice for to me? Thank you. Okay, Prof, you can answer the two questions first.
Which one? Which okay.
The first is which comes first, objective or research question?
Okay. The research question, which should be part of the problem statement, should come first. Okay. But now in the thesis, we have written the research question in like a problem statement. It is, for example, when we apply the FRGS grant, normally we will write in terms of question. But now we have rewrite the research question into a problem statement. So it should be before the objective. The objective should be answering the problem statement. Okay.
Okay.
And the second one?
And the second one is about the literature review. She had written around 70 pages because she put the fundamental to her work as well as previous study for my problem statement, her problem statement. So she worried if the examiner think she had written so much in this part. So what your advice?
Okay. My advice is that it should not be longer than your results and discussion chapter. Okay. And you should take into account of the selectivity of the literature review. If you think that you have select properly and everything is being justified, and then it is connected with your chapter 1, then it is okay. But I think 70 pages might be a little bit long. You can make it more concise, but do not make it longer than the results and discussion.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully, Prof answer your question, Rauda. Okay, and question from Saidu Mansur Adam. First, are there maximum or minimum number of research gap expected of the PhD student to cover in his or her thesis? Prof?
Okay. What is more important is the research objective. For PhD thesis, in my field, normally the student will write what is the overall objective, and then it will be followed by 3 or 4 objectives, overall objective, and then we have 3 or 4 objectives. And then each objective will need to tie up with the problem statement. Okay. Not all the objectives should be novel. Maybe out of that 3, 2 is novel, is good enough, and 1 maybe it is repetitive of previous work. So at least the problem statement is related to at least 2 of the objective. Okay.
Okay. So his second question, must a PhD researcher covers practical, theoretical, and methodological issue before the examiner consider the thesis contributive? Must a PhD researcher covers practical, theoretical, and methodological issues before the examiner consider the thesis contributive?
It's quite difficult for me to answer.
Prof can check at
maybe
the chat.
I'm not because we are from the different field.
Yeah, maybe.
So it is better that you discuss this with your supervisors or other lecturers in the field, because my answer may be misleading. This is a general topic, general talk for everybody. But for your specific things, it is better for you to ask people exactly in your field.
Okay. Next question from Humber to Ramirez. Hello, doctor. Thank you for the webinar. Very edifying. I've got a question. When there is a discrepancy between your view, which is normally in line with your supervisors, and somehow backed by your sources and the examiners, which examiner's view, which is based on experience or convention, what do you recommend? Prof boleh tengok kat chat juga. Humber to Ramirez. Discrepancy between your view, which is normally in line with your supervisors and somehow backed by your sources, and the examiner view. Conflict between examiner's view and your view, and which is based on experience or convention, what do you recommend, Prof?
My view is that as a student, you should follow the advice from your supervisor. Advice from your supervisor, and are you asking? Have you undergone the examination process by the examiner? When you mentioned that the examiner has different opinion, maybe you want to talk.
Please, Mr. Ramirez, you can unmute and explain to Prof. Okay, no. Or you can.
If it is before the Viva, you should follow the supervisor as much as possible, and maybe during the Viva or after the Viva, the supervisor can give the opinion to the examiner to support you.
Okay, hopefully Mr. Humber to Ramirez will contact Prof after this, okay, to explain more. Okay, from Abdurrahman, how to go about the result and discussion in a paper that does not have simulation or experiment? Is it a review paper, Abdurrahman? How to go about the result and discussion in a paper that does not have simulation or experiment?
Is it a survey paper?
Not clear about your question.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, how about as a case study?
Case study.
Case study, okay.
Assalamualaikum, Prof. Can I ask you?
Okay.
Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
Okay. Assalamualaikum, Mr. Chairwoman, and also Professor Adjunct Azman Hassan. It's a very good opportunity. I meet you. This is the first time I joined British, and I'm very proud with you, Professor Osman. Okay, I just want to ask you one question, maybe one or two questions.
Maybe you can
Okay,
on your video. We can look at.
Sure. Okay, I can show me my handsome face. Thank you so much. Can you see me? Yes, correct. Okay. I just want to ask you, Professor Osman. I have read one like article journal, but article journal cited with another article journal. So I didn't get the original one. How I'm to cite the not the secondary, not the main point. You get what I mean? You get my
I see your point. Okay.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, just ask your experience as orang lama lah, veteran person and very knowledgeable. My supervisor is very nice person and very lenient, too lenient. Sometimes I ask him what's supposed to do. Okay, it's okay. You just do it. And then I ask him again. Is it okay? Just go. So sometimes he didn't push me. Sometimes I don't know where to go. So he just keep quiet and so very nice, very too lenient. So can you guide me how to handle this kind of case? Thank you, Professor.
Okay. About the second question about the supervisor. I teach research methodology class to PhD when before my retirement. So one of the slides that I show to the student is types of supervisor. Type of supervisor. So some supervisors they are very trying to what's the word? Working hard for promotion and so on. Some are already in the comfort zone, maybe I don't know. So for most, when the lecturers are in the comfort zone, they tend not to push the student as well. I think that's the thing. One of the things maybe you can discuss with your supervisor that you need a co-supervisor. Have you discussed with your
because the time
co-supervisor?
No, because the time is critical. I'm the final semester right now. I don't think
You've
so.
Already final semester.
Yep. And then I don't think so. My SB is in comfort zone because from what I know, if I'm not mistaken, he told me I'm the first person to become a student, and he is so much worse. Maybe he's not his first time. Maybe they're lacking here and there. I'm not sure. But he's a very nice person, very too lenient. make me problem for myself.
I think you need to trust him. Okay. His expertise because he has done his PhD, and also if you can talk.
He doesn't have PhD.
Huh?
He doesn't have PhD.
Oh, he doesn't have PhD. Okay. Okay. It happens to me as well. When I was doing my PhD in Labra, my supervisor did not have a PhD at that time, but he has published many papers in the journal, so he has that experience of to see the standards of the publication. So but you have passed all the preliminaries, your proposal stage. You have improved your thesis based on the comment by the examiners in the proposal. I think that I think that will be sufficient, because if you have done accordingly, the comments should be sufficient that it is up to PhD level. Okay. What about your first question?
I'm doing my master. My focus is I try to cite it for the secondary reference, not the main one, because you get my question, right?
You're right. Why is it difficult to get the original reference? Have you tried Google Scholar or?
Yeah, I didn't get that. And then that number one, number two, when I asked the librarian, they have then tried to get it from that one of the local university, but the local university said you must come to that university and take that thesis.
Oh, you want to refer to the thesis?
For example lah, because I got one of thesis lah. This is from this very relevant to my research. Okay. But unfortunately, during that time was an MCO, and that is not relevant. It's not making sense. I want to go to the north, go to that university, and photostat that thesis, and then going back to my home. Okay. That time I cannot close the state. And
my advice is, can you get the author and you use Google Scholar to check probably that particular person has already published in a journal from the thesis. So you can cite the journal then, rather than you cite the thesis. It is better to cite a journal paper than to cite a thesis from other universities.
Okay. If let's say
you can do that. I've done that. You get the name of the authors and check whether he has published. If not, you can cite that this paper cited in that paper in your reference. I think you need to check your UMP. Are you from UMP?
No, I'm from USIM.
USIM, huh? You check the reference format of USIM, how to cite a paper which we do not get and we are citing other paper. There must be a way.
Cite on cited lah. You mean cite on site? Is it?
Yeah, you can ask. You can check the postgraduate guideline, or you can ask if it is rare, you can ask the dean herself. USIM,
Yep, USIM, yep.
Professor Norita is the.
Oh, CGS, yeah, correct. Yeah. You know her?
You can ask her probably what is the method to cite.
You know her? Oh, very good.
Yeah, I know her because she is also part of Prentice.
Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you for your information, Prof. I'm very, very happy to see you. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to talk?
Okay, never mind. You can message me or if you have any problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Mr. Nur Azlan. Okay, so we have another question from Wendy. What should the abstract cover?
Okay, I think I have mentioned just now the abstract cover.
Maybe I missed it just now, Prof. Yeah.
Okay. A good abstract, it should start with a short introduction, which include the problem statement. Okay. And then you go to the objective and a method and try to include all the important results, conclusion, and lastly, the implication of the study. What is the overall implication or the possible application? Okay. Based on my experience, there are also examiners who do not like to start with a short introduction. They would like to start right away with objective. So the objective of the study. Okay. Although personally, I would say to my student to start with a short introduction. Not just 1 or 2 sentences is enough. So I have in that case, I am the supervisor, so I have to follow the examiner because that is the examiner is the king in that situation. So we have to follow.
Thank you.
So we have to delete the introduction and start with objective.
Yes, thank you very much. And the other question, sorry, is do we have a chance to know who is our examiner, external examiner?
Yes, you should. I don't think it is a secret. Normally, in UTM, we have to submit 3 names. Okay, we have to submit 3 names. The supervisor has to submit. Okay, so you can ask your supervisor, or even some supervisor, they would discuss with the student who they think we want to nominate. Then they will nominate, and it will go into various committee at the faculty level and also at the university level. And then you may ask your supervisor. Maybe your supervisor can ask the the postgraduate office who has been selected among the three. Or maybe they have selected not among the three. It is also possible. Okay, it is also possible. So you can ask your supervisor. I don't think it is a secret.
Thank you very much. It's very informative, Professor.
Which university are you in?
University Malaysia, Sabah. I'm a Malaysian, but because I am now in Melbourne, it's just that I cannot get back to Malaysia. So
Okay.
I'm studying on my own alone here. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for attending.
Very informative. I like it very much.
Okay.
Your session.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, from Farida. Hi, Prof. May I know if we should introduce the abbreviation we use in the text before using it, since we already enlist the abbreviation in the preliminary section?
Okay. Yes, we should introduce the first time only. Although it is inside the abbreviation list, we should explain what is the meaning of the word. As I said that the abstract is stand-alone. So if you have already explained the abstract, you need to explain again in the chapters. In the chapters. So my answer is that we have to explain the first one. But there are also many students who explain many times.
Okay, from Sokme Ko, compare the findings that we obtain with the published data. Would this show the low novelty of our studies, as someone has reported their findings of similar studies before?
Okay. Okay, right. My answer to that. Can I use my own field to produce? For example, my student is studying the effect of graphene on, let's say, on polyethylene terephthalate polymer. So we get certain value. So in that study, the novelty is we have used the graphene, but we have the blank sample, which is the only polyethylene terephthalate. So many studies have done on this polyethylene terephthalate. So from our study, we want to see that the polyethylene terephthalate blank sample which we obtain, is it in the range, the same range as the one reported by the company or by the previous studies? For example, let's say polyethylene terephthalate should have the tensile strength of 60 megapascal. If you get only 22 or 25, or even worse, you get 5. So there is something wrong somewhere in your study, whether the way you test is wrong or the machine is not working. So you must be prepared during the viva. If the examiner, if experienced examiner, okay, that maybe include me. I like to check whether the data that you obtain is in the similar. At least the blank sample should be the same in the range. Not exactly the same, but within certain values. So you know that your experiment is correctly done. Maybe the one that was being added with graphene is the novelty, so you cannot compare. But at least the blank sample should be in the range. Okay. I hope that answers. Siapa tanya?
Tadi Sokme Ko.
Okay, Sokme, does that answer your question, please? Can
Yes,
you reply?
Prof. Yes, Prof. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I do agree with you. Thank you so much.
Okay. What area is you studying?
In chemistry, analytical chemistry.
Okay, quite the same as me. Okay, so
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Prof, from Afizi, for students, do they able to recommend any examiners for their viva?
Okay. The one who recommend is the supervisor. Okay, the supervisor need to nominate 3 potential examiner. Some supervisors, they would discuss with the student. The student can be proactive and discuss with the supervisor. But normally the student, they do not know many people. So the supervisor will make the decision to nominate. But you can talk with your supervisor. If you want somebody or you have anybody in mind, you can suggest to your supervisor and your supervisor can make the nomination. Okay.
Okay, Prof. From Michelle, I wish to know in general what is expected from master student as well. Is it same as for PhD students?
Okay. For master student, there must also be certain level of novelty. Okay, but the extent is less compared to the PhD. So the PhD, the level of novelty and the amount of data is more compared to master's degree. So for PhD, as I've said, it is better to have 3 objectives. For masters, 2 is sufficient. 2 is sufficient. So, and at least one of the objective is very noble. Okay, one of the objective must be very noble. That's for masters. For PhD, out of that 3, 2 should be very noble and significantly contribute to knowledge.
Okay, Prof. Hopefully the answer it answer your question. Okay, from Muhammad Nur Azizi. Salam, Prof. My question, after we have found the gap in the studies and we did the research to fill in or close the gap, then in the last year of PhD, somebody somewhere has published similar findings to fill the gap. Will our research can still be considered expansion of knowledge, or it will create the den of the knowledge circle? Thank you.
Okay, that is why thank you for the question. That's why it is important for you to publish your work. Okay, even though you submit, after you submit the paper, after you submit the thesis, there is another person who has published similar result. But then if you have also published your paper, then you can confirm that your work is noble. Okay. If that happen, you need to really study that paper, and you must find something different. You must do. You must make a study of the paper and compare with your PhD work, and really find something different. Because this is this happened to one of my PhD students, Dr. Reza. He's working in Birmingham now. When he was about to submit the thesis, then it happened that similar studies have been reported. So in a way, we were happy because this shows that our research is good, that somewhere else in other parts of the world is also interested. But the problem then that will affect our novelty. So myself and the student, we study the paper carefully, and we note down what are the difference. So we address that in the problem statement. We say that very little study has been done recently. Okay, very recently, so and so has published, and then we highlight the difference. Then it is okay. The examiners agree with what we do, but we address that in our problem statement. We do not keep quiet. Okay.
Okay. Hopefully answer your question. From
Yeah.
Widat, do this examiner's perspective apply also for social and Islamic studies? What you talk about today, is it apply also to social and Islamic studies, Prof?
Yes, I think that novelty part, it applies to every PhD.
Okay.
The unique contribution from PhD that covers. But the way, I'm not sure actually, the way you write the result and discussion might be different. But all the thesis must show clearly what is the contribution on knowledge that applies to every PhD thesis, even from engineering, from sciences and social science. Okay.
Okay, from Shaima, as you mentioned that there is a pre-viva report, is it the last report can be changed after the student presentation first? Okay. If data not enough for PhD level, can the student add more work with not having reviva? And third question, would it possible, Prof, to give us idea about why you give a student fail in Viva as you mentioned in the presentation?
Okay. Just the first question was?
The first is there is a pre-Viva report.
Okay.
Is it
All right.
the last report can be changed after the student presentation?
Yes, the report can be changed after the Viva. If the student explains everything during the Viva on the certain critical issues that the examiner are not clear, then you will be upgraded, maybe from major correction to minor correction. But if the student cannot answer even simple question, even simple question. For example, in my field, if the examiner just asks, what is the difference between elongation and elongation at break? If the student are working on polymer composite, then we expect the student to know. If they cannot answer that certain question, simple question, then we will try to ask simpler question to see the level. So we can know how much the student knows. Normally, if the student cannot answer certain level of question, we will try to make simpler and then simpler, and then we know how much knowledge the student has. Okay. Okay.
The second question, if data not enough for PhD level, can the student add more work with not having reviva?
Okay. So normally adding more work, that will surely needs for a viva, unless the experiment is too simple. It's too simple. Just making SEM of certain formulation. But if you need to do new formulation or new sets of data, then it is too major, then surely needs a viva. In UTM, if you get a resubmission, but if you do your writing very well, you can be considered to pass without a need for viva. So if you get a resubmission, then the examiner will make a comment whether there is a need of viva or not. That question?
Would it possible, Prof, to give us idea why about why you give a student fail in viva as you mentioned in the presentation?
Okay, that particular student, I hope she is not with us today. During the first viva, the viva was being stopped by the chairperson after half an hour because the student cannot answer all questions from both examiners. So the Viva was being stopped, and the student needs to resubmit the thesis, and another Viva was being set. So then I received the revised thesis, and then we went to the Viva again. Okay, so the thesis has improved. The thesis has improved, but it needs to be revised again. However, according to that particular university's regulation, there is no more minor or major correction. It is either pass or fail. So in that case, I have no choice to fail the student, because the verdict is either pass or fail. So in that case, the internal examiner also agrees that the student failed. So the decision from the panel was a fail. If the regulation of the university says that it can still have a major correction, then I may give a major correction so that the student can improve.
Okay, thank you, Prof. The question from Wendy is the last question here from this chat board. Okay, so is it your slide is available for all the participants, Prof?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
We'll make a PDF of the.
Yeah,
of
okay.
Thank you.
So all of you
Maybe
can get.
we will upload in the Printis website.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very beneficial. Thank you very much,
So,
Professor.
okay, hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, finally we come to the end part of our presentation, our session today. I would like to say thanks again to Prof. A lot of thank you to Prof. And for the informative and interesting talk for today, and to all of you, audience and participant, for your active participation. Okay, hopefully the presentation will benefit. This webinar today is beneficial for you, and will give you some can you for you to get a very good presentation today. Okay, so
Dr. Suzaimah,
yeah?
can I say my final words?
Yeah, okay, Prof.
Thank you very much to everybody who has attended this program today.
Thank you too.
Okay, frankly, I have spent quite lot of time preparing the slides to gather more information. I hope it will benefit, and thank you also to Dr. Suzaimah and to Printis. From the list of attenders, I can see so many people also from Nigeria, from Afghanistan. I hope they are here today and have benefited from the talk. Once again, thank you very much to everybody for your time, and I hope that we can meet on other occasion with Printis. Maybe you can suggest to Printis what are the topics that you are interested. Then maybe if it's suitable, then we can organize again. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Thank you all of you. If you can open on your video so that we can take a photo. Okay, so hopefully the secretariat can take the photo. Okay. So smile. 1, 2, 3, smile, cheese. 1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 2, 3. We have 7 screen. Okay. Okay, 7, 5. Okay, so okay. So that's all. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Hopefully
Thank you,
we
Prof.
can, all of you can
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much.
to
Really
print this
appreciate it.
activities, print this webinar after at the future.
Thank you very
Inshallah.
much
Thank
once
you.
again.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
God bless you.
Thank you, Professor. I really appreciate it. We like it so much.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Thank
You
you,
look
Doctor.
young.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih, Profesor.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you very much.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu fikum.